These are allegedly true winter night horror stories recounted by the victims. If you have a true scary story, submit to Chilling Nightmares. If you love scary stories, click subscribe. Before my wife and I were married, we had a terrifying experience with a creep during a blizzard in Seven Springs, Pennsylvania. Karen's family had a camp near the ski resort. It was a rustic cabin built by her grandfather in the 1930s as a moonshine operation. It was on land his father timbered in the 1920s. It was remote, with only a single-lane road twisting its way back into the hills. It's paved now and plowed in the winter, as there are some year-round families back there, but mostly it's vacation homes used in the summer and during ski season. It's primitive, meaning it's heated by a wood stove and has an outhouse for a toilet. There is water from a well with a pump, so there is an operational sink in the kitchen and drinking water, but no shower. In the summer, they have an outdoor shower heated by a solar panel, but in the winter, it's a sponge bath with water on the wood stove. We didn't plan on bathing for our weekend trip, though. Electric power was supplied by a diesel generator that stored energy in a battery pack, so it didn't run constantly. It was my first trip to the camp, and we drove Karen's father's Jeep Wrangler. Karen said it would be necessary to get up the driveway that would not be plowed and was steep in places. As we followed the mountain road for a few miles, Karen told me to slow down as we approached the driveway. I would have missed it if she hadn't been with me. It was a small pass between a boulder and a tree hidden from the road that went up steeply at first, then twisted its way back a quarter-mile to the cabin. About a foot of snow was on the driveway, but the Jeep handled it well. We put our luggage in the bedroom, lit a fire in the wood stove to warm the cabin, and headed out to the ski resort for an afternoon of snowboarding. We returned late, having eaten at the resort after a hard workout on the slopes. We were beaten with exhaustion and very happy. A wonderful day. We curled under the comforter, with the fire stoked in the living room, and watched a movie. After half the movie, I put my boots on and headed to the outhouse. It was a short walk back into the woods. As I plodded through the fresh snow, I came across tracks. It was not fresh, as snow filled them in the last hour. They were big, however, and deep. They left the woods in the back, circled the cabin, and continued back into the woods on the opposite side. I peed and returned to the cabin, telling Karen something had passed the house. She thought it could have been a black bear, as some are in this part of the state. Not likely human, as the weather was already blowing snow, the forecast was blizzard conditions in the hour, and we were far from any other house and a trek from the road. We watched the rest of the movie, drinking beer and eating potato chips. After that, we played gin rummy for a couple of hours. At bedtime, I needed the outhouse again. I put my boots and coat back on since I would need a longer stay, and I ran out into the blizzard. I sat on the cold throne, listening to the wind blowing and our music playing distantly through the storm in the house. Then, unmistakably, I heard what sounded like boots trudging through snow. I called out, "Is that you, Karen? I'll be a couple more minutes." The boots trudged past the outhouse, and the sound disappeared with no answer. A few more minutes passed, and I was still sitting in the cold, dark outhouse, and the music from the cabin stopped. I quickly finished up and headed back through the now heavy snowfall. It was pitch black. The lights were out in the cabin for some reason. I figured the generator had failed to kick on and the batteries were dead. I used my cell phone flashlight, but I came across fresh tracks in the snow as I stepped a few feet. These prints were not bear, but human. They led to the house. At the front porch, they went off along the side of the house. I bounded up the steps and yelled for Karen to open the door. I heard her pull the bolt, and she opened the door. In a single motion, she grabbed my coat and pulled me in, throwing the door bolt back into place. She hushedly whispered, "A man had tried to enter the kitchen door in the back. So I bolted the front door and waited for you, but I killed the power when I saw him looking in the windows." As she whispered, we heard the front door rattle as someone tried to open it. We were trapped. A face appeared at the living room window, frightening us both. Karen whispered, "There's a trapdoor in the kitchen floor to a secret room used to avoid revenuers in the moonshine days." We quickly dropped into a small room and closed the secret trapdoor behind us as we heard the front door shatter. The intruder was in the house. We sat absolutely silent in the dark as heavy boots and a voice incoherently thundered above us obscenities. We listened from the secret moonshiner escape room as the cabin was ransacked. Chairs and tables were overturned and kitchen pots and pans were tossed. Our luggage was scattered and searched for anything valuable. Both our wallets were stolen. Happily, I had the Jeep's keys in my pocket. When the rampage ceased, we loaded the Jeep and drove all night home through the blizzard. Karen's dad called the police, but all traces of the creepy snowman had vanished under the snow. I'm a second-year student at the University of Akron. Akron is a Rust Belt city if there ever was one. It's the retired rubber capital of America, or at least that's our joke. Almost all the car tire manufacturers are long gone from the city, but I was born here, so it's home. As a pizza delivery driver, I know the dangers of being on the road at night and the risk of bodily injury when knocking on doors. But not in my wildest dreams did I think I'd encounter ruthless thugs in a blizzard. Here is my blizzard terror story. This part of Ohio can get some nasty snowstorms, and pizza delivery gets busy when it does. A guy like me with a Jeep can make some serious money. The other drivers don't even go out, so 3 times the deliveries. The customers tend to tip more generously as they know that they are putting you through a lot ordering a pizza during blizzard conditions and still getting it hot to their door. My Jeep is old, but with good tires. It can handle just about anything Mother Nature can throw at it, and I'm confident in my driving skills. I know there is a greater danger, but I didn't know where it would come from. The night of this story was mid-February, and the snow started falling around dark at 5 o'clock. By 7, it was drifting, and the plows had difficulty staying up. The wind was gusting out of the west at 40 miles an hour. Very few cars were on the road, and those who were stranded or in an accident. The police and tow services were hectic. I drove slowly and could feel the ice buildup on the road under the drifts. It was a treacherous night. I thought it was unsafe for me when another delivery popped up on my cell phone. I returned to the pizzeria and picked it up, thinking this would be my last run in this blizzard. It really was becoming too dangerous. This last delivery address was a little out of town, and snowplows had cleared this road for several hours. I could feel the Jeep slipping as it was buffeted in the wind. My windshield was ice-coated, making it challenging to see. I was straining to keep on the road, staring through the windshield. Suddenly, I saw an object half buried in the center of the road. I tried to stop, but the Jeep started sliding on the ice. I gave it a little gas to try and maneuver around the obstacle, but the Jeep slid into the snowbank aside the road. It was really buried as I tried to work it free, rocking it back and forth with all wheels spinning. I needed a tow out of the drift, but I'd be fine after. I called the tow service, and a man said he could get to me in 30 minutes. I sat for 5 minutes listening to the weather radio when a truck pulled up with its yellow hazard lights flashing atop the truck. I said, that was quick, and I was thrilled to see them. A man in a winter parka walked up to my Jeep, and I opened the window, letting the snow fly in. You need assistance? He asked. That was a little weird. It was obvious I was stuck, and I had called. Yeah, just get me back on the road, I said. Let me see what I can do, he replied as he walked to the back of my Jeep. He opened the back door and peered inside, scanning the interior. You alone in here? He shouted above the storm. That was very strange. Alert bells started going off in my head. This guy didn't have any equipment, and his truck was a 4x4, not a tow truck with a winch or anything. I quickly dialed the tow service I had called 5 minutes before, and the same man answered, I'm a few minutes away. I'll be getting you soon." At that moment, the man in the parka opened my door and said, "You'll need to get out of the car and assist me back here." Again, this request seemed odd, but I complied and followed him to the back of my car where a second man appeared. He was holding a Smith & Wesson 9mm. "Everything. Give me everything you got or I'll put you deep into the snow." His voice told me he wasn't bluffing. I pulled $536 from cash payments and tips from my pocket. I was so nervous my hand was shaking as I went to hand it over. He pointed the gun directly in my face, and I lost control of my body and started to fall. My hand just released the cash and the blizzard wind swept it away. I stuttered, I'm sorry," with a tear in my eye, thinking death was near. At that moment, a truck air horn blared through the wind, and the yellow flashing lights of a big service truck with halogen roof lights lit the area. The two men turned and ran, escaping into the winter storm. I was terrified, and relief flooded through me. The roadside assistance truck loomed large above me, and two men came running over to make sure I was unharmed. Apparently, I had not disconnected the call when the robber asked me to exit my car, and the servicemen heard the entire exchange and rushed to my location. They had also notified the police, who also responded to my location. They found the obstacle in the road had been deliberately placed there with the intent to rob whoever crashed avoiding it. I was the unlucky pizza delivery driver. The service truck pulled my Jeep from the snowbank, and the officers helped me recover $329 that had blown around. The rest had disappeared into the night. I was fortunate to leave this chilling nightmare alive. My uncle was a confirmed bachelor at 45. He lived alone at the end of a cul-de-sac in a nice house somewhat set back from the street in a very private setting. He seldom traveled and worked from home as an engineer online. My dad said Uncle Eddie was always a loner and admitted that he was a little odd, but he was harmless and enjoyed his peace and quiet. I visited him occasionally, taking him coffee and donuts, which we would eat mostly in silence in the kitchen. When we did talk, I did most of the talking, telling Uncle Eddie about Sicily and Sardinia. These are places that I wanted to visit when I had some money once I started working. I tried to convince him he should travel and see the world since he had saved a bunch of his money from his engineering business. One morning, Eddie called me and said he had to go to Frankfurt, Germany to see a structure he was consulting on. The developers were insistent that he come and see the project in person. He reluctantly agreed and asked if I'd watch over his house. He had 3 cats, 2 parakeets, and a tarantula in a glass tank he needed me to take care of. I could sleep upstairs in the guest room that had never seen a guest and use the kitchen, but I was forbidden to go into any other room. I could park my car in the garage, but I was not to walk in the yard. That was okay because we had a bunch of snow on the ground and another blizzard forecasted. The first night I made a frozen pizza in the oven and watched a movie in the bedroom on my laptop. But at some point, in the middle of the night, I heard movement coming from downstairs. I brushed it off as the cats chasing each other and went back to sleep. An hour later, I heard a sound again. It came from the front door. I went downstairs and looked through the peephole. No one was there, so I opened the door with the chain lock on and peeked out. Fresh footprints were leading up to the front door. I slammed it shut and bolted it, all the while breathing heavily. Who would be outside in this blizzard? I went to the back window, and through the blowing snow I saw someone walking away from the house. It was either a very short man or a kid. I couldn't tell for sure in the dark, but I thought it was perhaps a 9-year-old. I wasn't so frightened thinking it was a child. I was more worried about why a child would be out on this freezing night. I called the police to report my sighting of a child out in the blizzard in the middle of the night. They sent a patrol. They didn't find any tracks when they arrived as the wind and blowing snow had obliterated them. I was showing them from the back window where I saw them, and there came a weak knock at the front door. The cop said, "Stay here." And he went to the door and was surprised to find a small child standing there. He wasn't dressed for the weather, just a hoodie and sweatpants. The patrolman brought him inside and asked him where he lived and where his parents were, but the kid stared blankly at the officer, with no expression or words. After a few hours, the kid indicated he lived in this house, but an Amber Alert from weeks before proved he was reported missing in another town. A couple of days later, my uncle returned and I went home, but in the back of my mind was always the question, why did my uncle forbid me to walk out in the yard and stay only in the kitchen and guest room? Was he keeping children at the house? Were they runaways, or did he kidnap them? Was he doing something nefarious? He is a weird man, but was he capable of this? I never went back to visit him again. I think it is possible.
Subscribe